I made a video about my opposition to routine infant circumcision in the United States and the lasting trauma that puts on our boys and men, both physical trauma, scarring, loss of function, but also psychological trauma. And I was hypothesizing whether that has any part to play in the toxic masculinity that is so pervasive in American culture. Because this is the one area where dudes in the manosphere, and I agree, they have a lot of rage, anger, they feel victimized by this practice. And I think their rage is justified. They had a functional body part amputated without their consent when they were babies. And I was talking about the book, The Body Keeps the Score, and someone said it's more than just that. I'd say the bigger long-term impact is not the cutting itself, but the culture that says it's normal. Okay, it's healthy to do male genital mutilation. The cutting, of course, has an effect as well. This is such a good point. It's not just the trauma that was done to their bodies. It's that the culture has said, you should be okay with this happening to you. We're okay with doing this. We're okay. We have normalized violating you in this way. You think that doesn't fuck up boys and men? And actually, I was really horrified at the number of women, only women in my comments, who said, you have no right to compare circumcision, male genital mutilation, with FGM, female genital mutilation, because someone said the latter that is done to girls is barbaric, and what is done to boys is a normal practice in our culture. Newsflash, they're both barbaric. The fact that people cannot understand that these two practices are analogous tells me how normalized this practice is in our culture and how okay we are with victimizing little boys. How we don't think it's that bad to do a cosmetic procedure on an infant, as long as they have a penis. And strictly medically speaking here, those of you that are saying that circumcision is not as extreme or as harmful as what is done to little girls, those are a whole range of practices with varying degrees of awfulness, horrificness. They are all human rights violations. You must not actually know what circumcision involves. I have seen it happen firsthand. I would encourage you to research what the practice actually involves. When my eldest was in the special care unit nursery, I watched it done to twin boys who are about to be discharged, and it was god awful. You may not be aware that for infants, the foreskin is fused to the glands of the penis. It has to be ripped off. They use an elastibel procedure. They have to rip it off. It is attached. It's attached. And then they have to cut it off. And for people saying like, why are you calling the foreskin a body part? It's not a body part. Are your eyelids body parts? Are your labia body parts? Are your lips body parts? How would you feel about having any of those forcibly amputated, often without anesthesia? You don't think you would experience scarring, loss of function? Let's also not forget that the foreskin's job is to protect the glands of the penis, and having it removed has significant sexual impacts for men. We don't really like to talk about that in this culture because the reason that this procedure is done to boys in the first place is to reduce them, self-stimulating. So if you're one of the half dozen women in my comments saying that circumcision to boys is no big deal, or that it's bad to compare it to FGM, they are analogous procedures and they both cause scarring, physical, psychological loss of function. They are both painful, have lots of consequences. As I said in my other video, one of the top procedures, surgical procedures that young boys need is circumcision revision because it is so frequently botched. Let's not also set aside the fact that usually, on average, about 100 boys in the United States die every year from complications of circumcision. They usually bleed to death. It is not a feminist take to deny the trauma and harm that we do to little boys with routine infant circumcision. It has consequences for those boys when they turn into men, and I would argue for everybody that they have relationships with. It's a human rights violation. We do it for cosmetic reasons. There is no functional reason to do it. And I've said this in another video, but people who are like, oh, well, it might reduce the risk of penile cancer is incredibly, incredibly rare. Do we prophylactically remove women's breasts because 1 in 9 of us will get breast cancer down the road? Name another functional body part that we prophylactically remove at infancy in order to prevent a rare type of cancer. These are sick rationalizations that we use in order to justify mutilating little boys. Same thing if you come at me with UTIs. Cool. We give girls antibiotics. We give adults antibiotics. We don't cut off their body parts because they get UTIs. do the least harm and use the most effective medical treatment. It's not that fucking complicated. None of this is that complicated. This procedure is outdated, barbaric, puritanical. It has origins from complete quacks like Kellogg, who wanted to stop little boys from touching themselves. That's it. There's no medical justification. Other countries don't do it. Other countries don't do it, and they don't have the kind of problems that we claim necessitate this procedure. Talk to your boys, teach them how to wash themselves and how to take care of themselves. It's not rocket brain surgery. This human rights violation has got to stop.